Welcome to The Explainer. We're about to break down a pretty startling analysis, one that looks at where terrorism is headed. And the answer it gives? Well, it focuses on the most vulnerable target you can imagine, children. So yeah, let's get right into it.
You know, the source material we're digging into today, it really doesn't pull any punches. It asks this incredibly direct and honestly pretty unsettling question about how this global threat is evolving. It's really forcing us to look past what's happening now and peer into what could be a much darker future.
And the answer it lands on? Wow. It's as simple as it is chilling. The core argument here is that the next generation, the one that's supposed to be our future, is being actively groomed to become the future of terrorism.
So, the big question is, why children, right? How on earth can a kid become what the source calls a dangerous weapon? Well, this first part really breaks down the psychology of it, all those environmental factors that these terrorist groups have gotten so good at exploiting.
Okay, take a look at these risk factors. What's really crucial to understand here is that this isn't about ideology, not at first. This is all about trauma, their environment, just pure instability. I mean, the research is clear. You combine these things, abuse, bullying, poverty, even just what they're seeing in the media, and it makes young people so much more vulnerable to being manipulated, to violent behavior. It basically creates the perfect recruiting ground for someone looking for an impressionable mind.
And that leads us right into the modern battlefield, the place where the fight for these young minds is happening right now. And it's not some place you can point to on a map. It's the internet. Cyberspace has become the #1 tool for radicalization, and believe me, the methods they're using are getting scarily sophisticated.
And look, this isn't just some theory the source is throwing out there. No way. It's pointing to actual, established research. Take this quote right here. It highlights a very real, scientifically studied link between virtual violence, like in video games, and a rise in actual real-world aggression. And terrorist groups, they know this. They absolutely understand this connection, and they are using it.
This right here, this illustrates their strategy perfectly. On one side, you've got your normal, everyday video game. But on the other, you see how they mimic that exact structure for something way, way darker. They just swap out the fun, fictional stories for their own real-world extremist narratives. Entertainment becomes indoctrination. They're basically hijacking the language of gaming to make their violent ideology seem normal, or even worse, to make it seem exciting to kids.
And again, this isn't just an abstract idea. The source points to some really chilling, real-world examples. You've got Hezbollah releasing a game that literally put its kids in the shoes of their fighters. Then there's an ISIS-modded version of Grand Theft Auto. Yep, you heard that right. Designed to make attacking police seem normal. And then you have something like the Blue Whale Challenge. Now, that one wasn't directly a terrorist thing, but man, it shows just how dangerous this can get, how virtual commands can lead to real-world self-harm and even death.
Okay, so let's shift gears now. Let's move from the virtual world to the physical one, because here, the indoctrination stops being subtle. It's systematic, it's direct, and its only goal is to completely reshape a child's mind. So the source lays out what it calls the ISIS curriculum, and it's a chillingly methodical system. Just look at the steps. First, theory, learning about weapons. Then ideology, drilling in that radical us versus them worldview. And finally, physical training to create obedient, ruthless fighters. It's not education, it's a pipeline. A pipeline designed to strip away every bit of childhood and forge a human weapon.
But why does this even work? That's the million-dollar question, right? And the answer is, it's complicated and it's never just one thing. For some kids, it's about a twisted idea of honor, or just peer pressure. For others, they feel totally left out, and this gives them a sense of belonging. Money can be a factor, for sure. But then there's just pure force and fear. A lot of these kids are kidnapped. Others join just to stay alive, to protect themselves from the very people they're now fighting alongside.
And then you layer something else on top of all that, the power of religious ideology. The source defines this type of terrorism as being driven by religious imperatives. The goals here aren't just political. They want to completely reshape the world order. And when you add that in, it gives them this powerful psychological and philosophical justification. It makes the indoctrination we've been talking about that much more potent and that much harder to break free from.
Now, I know it's easy to look at all this and think, well, that's a problem happening way over there. But the analysis is very clear. That would be a huge mistake. It actually calls these radicalized kids slow-acting bombs, a threat that, because of the global migration crisis, is no longer distant. It's bringing this challenge right to the West's doorstep. Let's just look at some numbers for a second, just to grasp the scale of this. A 2018 report found that over 41,000 people from 80 different countries were affiliated with ISIS in Iraq and Syria. Think about that. This was never, ever just a local conflict. And get this, of that massive number, a staggering 12% were kids, minors. We're talking thousands of children who were either dragged there by their radicalized parents or were recruited directly from all corners of the globe.
But this next number, this one might be the most worrying of all. More than 730 children were born inside the so-called caliphate to foreign fighters. I mean, these kids have never known any other world. They're a whole new generation born and raised in extremism. And that creates a challenge for the future, for rehabilitation, for global security, that is just completely unprecedented.
And this data from 2019 just shows how this problem has scattered across the globe. You see over 200,000 migrant children registered in Europe alone, with Syria as the #1 country they're coming from. So this isn't some what-if scenario for the future. No, it's happening right now. It's a reality across Europe in places like Germany, France, Greece, and Spain. They're all facing this immense challenge of what to do with a generation of kids who've been exposed to just unimaginable violence and ideology.
So, when you're faced with a reality this stark, what do? Is there even a solution? Well, the last part of this analysis shifts from just laying out the problem to actually proposing a strategy, a multi-pronged approach for the international community.
And that really is the central question, isn't it? For policymakers, for security experts, for all of us, really. The good news is the analysis doesn't just sound the alarm and walk away. It actually focuses on concrete, actionable steps we can take to push back against this threat. And the big takeaway here? There's no magic bullet. Not for something this complex. The response has to be, well, it has to be everything, all at once. It means we have to study the problem, yeah, but we also have to build up social programs for kids who are vulnerable. We need awareness campaigns. We need to monitor cyberspace. And this is so important, we have to actively track and support the migrant kids coming from these conflict zones. They need dedicated programs to help them reintegrate, to help them adapt. It's a whole strategy built on prevention, security, and, maybe most importantly, long-term healing.
At the end of the day, the source material leaves us with a really profound and honestly a pretty sobering thought. This isn't just about global security tactics and politics. It's about protecting the very idea of what it means to be a kid. Because once a child's world is twisted by violence and hate, that damage can last a lifetime. It creates ripples that eventually touch all of us. So the real question it leaves us with is a heavy one. For a child whose world was so completely broken, can it ever truly be mended?
I like racing games.
Great. Click here to play now.
What's happening?